Hello and welcome to another episode from the Underdogs podcast. Today, episode 16, we will have a look at the exploding dog. Do you know this? Your dog is lying totally relaxed on the sofa, and suddenly, out of nowhere, he jumps up and starts barking, making you drop your teacup in a shock. This can also happen outside. Suddenly, your dog goes crazy on the leash for no apparent reason. Or he stands at the garden fence acting as if Godzilla is about to come around the corner at any moment. Your dog is hardly able to calm down. In this episode, we will look at hearing, health aspects, behavior and conditioning, cause and effect, and most importantly, what can be done to support the dog, as it has a lot to do with the stress factor. And at the end, there's a note on something personal that will surely interest you. But let's start with the basics. The sensory organs in this case, the ears. What's the first thing we notice about a dog's ears? Exactly, they can move forward and backward. This serves communication but also better hearing. The human ear perceives sounds in a frequency range of 20 to 20,000 hertz. But the dog hears sounds from 15 to 50,000 hertz. The dog doesn't hear everything louder than we do, he simply hears better and further. Did you know that dogs are not only born blind but also deaf? The sense of hearing, like the sense of sight, only develops over time. And here's what's particularly interesting to us. The dog can filter sounds. This makes sense because otherwise he would go crazy in our world. So, a dog can sleep next to running TV, but he will hear when a car pulls into the driveway. This also explains why a dog doesn't respond when we call him, but is immediately present when the fridge is opened or a bag rustles. Of course, the dog can have poor hearing or be deaf, but if our dog doesn't respond to us, he just doesn't want to hear us. We are simply being ignored. Basically, this explains well why dogs often freak out seemingly for no reason. We are just bad listeners. Let's move on to the second point. The dog suddenly freaks out, can even bite, and then is as meek as a lamb again. There can indeed be a health issue. It's also known as the Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. It's possible that there is a neurological disorder. This is quite rare and must be clarified by a veterinarian. This doesn't apply to the case I'm currently talking about. I just wanted to mention it for the sake of completeness. The Jekyll and Hyde syndrome is really about a 180-degree change in the dog's nature in seconds and without any apparent reason. And I mean truly without reason in this case, because often we simply don't perceive the reason why our dogs are freaking out. In generally makes sense to take our dog to the vet if there is no apparent reason for his outbursts, as pain could indeed be the cause. So let's also take a look at behavior. What kind of character does your dog have? What breed? Is he naturally more insecure and easily distressed or more extrovert? Is he a guard dog? I don't mean a trained guard dog, but one that, due to his breed, is naturally a guard or farm dog. How territorial is your dog? How well socialized is he? All of this plays a significant role and influences behavior. In the past, in the past, we had dogs that would alert us if someone approaches our home and perhaps even looked intimidating while doing so. Today, this behavior often bothers us. Conditioning. Sometimes we are simply to blame ourselves. Yes, that sounds harsh and no one wants to hear it. But it happens that we make mistakes in raising, training, or teaching our dogs. and they then make the wrong associations. So the dog associates it correctly, it's just that we had something different in mind. Example: excitement. The puppy is still very young and cute, and every evening when dad comes home, everyone gets super excited, including the puppy. The puppy remembers this. He learns. It's evening, car arrives, dad comes, and we are all excited. Now the puppy grows up, and the bigger he gets, the more seriously he takes the game. Now he watches out, as he often hears the car first. Then he starts alerting and jumping around the door. Now the dog does this regularly for nearly every car that passes by. The dog has simply learned that it's fun to get excited when a car arrives. Conditioning. This can be undone and redirected, but it takes time and consistency. Another example: prey drive. The dog is supposed to ensure the neighbor's cat doesn't poop in the flowers. The dog naturally has a prey drive, which now intensifies unconsciously encouraged by humans. Now the dog is outside and sees a cat or a squirrel. How is he supposed to know that he shouldn't chase it too? Basically, it's a completely wrong strategy to send animals against each other. But here it's clear: the dog has learned that it's okay to chase the cat. He even enjoys it and gets rewarded. Now he shows the same behavior everywhere and with all small animals. And if you're unlucky, even with small children. The problem with the prey drive is, since the dog already has it, it is often activated and encouraged without us being consciously aware of or wanting it. There may be good intentions behind it, a game or training, but if misapplied, it leads to the wrong result in the dog. Another example: frustration. Frustration can also be conditioned. The dog doesn't get out enough and is understimulated. He finds a release valve. He starts barking at cars or passengers at the garden fence or window. The dog is peacefully sleeping in his basket, and the next moment he's at the window completely freaking out. What could be the cause behind this behavior? The dog doesn't want to annoy you. He is under enormous stress. That's why it's essentially not to try to change the behavior through force, but rather to find the cause of the stress and eliminate the associated conditioning. Cause and effect. Observe yourself. When are you relaxed and how relaxed are you? Or do 1,000 thoughts still whirl through your mind while meditating? We are not always relaxed, and the risk of getting angry or losing control increases the higher the stress levels are. This has a lot to do with what we believe to be true, in other words, what we think and then feel. When a dog, consciously or unconsciously, takes on a task, it triggers stress. The stress doesn't necessarily have to be negative, but hormones are released. The dog wants to do his job well. He wants to keep watch, hunt, or alert. This, in turn, releases happy hormones that reward the dog. So the first step is to find out what extent your dog can truly relax. Your dog lies on a spot and seems to be sleeping. You get up and go to the kitchen. Does your dog keep sleeping? Or does he watch what you're doing? Or follows you? How deeply does your dog sleep? It's probably not surprising that researchers have found out that dogs with high stress levels sleep poorly. Just like us humans, they are churning thoughts. We often say the dog lives in the here and now. The truth is, we all live in the here and now. We are physically here, always. Mentally, it gets more complicated. We think about what was and what will be. Then emotions come up and we become more and more separated from our authentic selves. This happens to animals too. How else could a horse refuse to walk into a trailer if it couldn't remember the past and draw conclusions about the future from it? Animals think, and they are capable of linking the past and the future. And like us, they often draw the wrong conclusion from this. Because thinking activates feelings. I remember an event, and the associated emotion arises. Now, I might want to experience it again or avoid it at all costs. We tend to label the animal as stubborn, stupid, malicious, or disobedient. No, the animal has a reason for its behavior. What does this mean for my exploding dog? First, become aware that the dog is stressed. Then realize that the dog doesn't want to annoy you. Then observe. Keep a journal. When does what happen? How do you feel in that moment? What's the overall situation? Research cause and effect. But what can you do concretely to reduce stress and diffuse the situation? There are some popular tools: throw chains, for example, water pistols, or bottles with nails. Simple and effective. Or so we like to think. It is like the aspirin. It addresses a symptom. I am stressed. So to relax, I drink a glass of wine or two in the evening. Then I have a headache the next morning and take an aspirin. Next evening, the same routine. Eventually, the wine isn't enough, and eventually, the aspirin isn't either. The problem behind it all is the stress. So, what can I do? First, become aware that I am stressed. When and why am I stressed, and what can I possibly change? Often, the simplest, yet most challenging option is to think differently about a situation. A house is on fire and everyone is stressed. Now the firefighters arrive. They are stressed too, but they can't think about that at the moment. They focus on risk analysis, applying their learned knowledge and skills, responding appropriately, extinguishing the fire, saving lives, then doing a debrief. The more I train myself to conscious handle situations, the less they stress me out. The more I know about a situation, the more clearly I can handle it. The less I think, what if, the clearer I'm able to act. If stress arises because I'm thinking about a particular situation, I can ask myself, is this really so? Is this true? Often it is the thinking itself that triggers stress. The same applies to the dog. He experiences stress based on fear, insecurity, and experiences. The dog thinks, oh, that wasn't good last time, better react immediately. To protect himself, or to please the human, or to try to regulate his own fear. What happens if I use a throw chain? I scare the dog. I tell the dog, stop it, or something even worse will happen. In the end, the dog is even more stressed because the original stress isn't reduced at all. Instead, the human becomes an additional stress factor plus the throw chain. This may interrupt the behavior in the moment, but in the long term, the dog doesn't understand why he should change its behavior, and he has no chance to healthily reduce the underlying cause, the stress. If you observe your dog and his behavior, you might be able to identify a pattern. You may even notice that you yourself are a piece of the puzzle in this behavioral pattern. Your own behavior, restlessness, a stress transfer to the dog. Now it's about changing this behavior. This takes time. The dog needs to be able to relax, to understand that the situation is not threatening. He needs to feel safe. He needs to be able to let go of control. He needs to recognize you as a leader and trust you. This doesn't happen overnight. But patience and persistence lead to success, entirely without force. The trust technique is a wonderful method to help the dog relax and change behavior permanently. At home, it's good for the dog to have a fixed place where he can lie undisturbed and truly relax, no matter what's happening. When outside, it's important to be very attentive to recognize potential triggers for undesirable behavior early on and redirect or divert from them. The more attentive and authentic I am, the more I'm in the here and now, the more my dog feels connected with me can trust me, and is willing to be guided. So, are you having trouble with your dog? Does your dog regularly freak out, but you don't have an explanation for it? Contact me and I will support you. And now, to close, two notes about my work. I have a free community where there is regular exchange and support for all things related to dogs and horses. It is the Mindful Animal Company on School. It is in English, and you are invited to join us. It is for free. But a part of this group, there will also be a weekly public live stream on YouTube every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central European Time. This live stream will be in English, and you're welcome to join and ask me questions. Or you can watch the recording afterward. This week's topic will, of course, be the exploding dog. I will talk about 4 different cases I have worked with. Because these outbursts can also be triggered by deep traumas. Dogs, too, can suffer from post traumatic stress disorder and experience flashbacks. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for your attention.